Welcome to Popular Imagination. If you followed along with the whole series, now you have all the basics that it takes to just download whatever objects you can and make some fun, cool, different stuff. So this video is about where to find those objects and how to get those objects to actually work, because this is something that I know is a bit of a point of contention, especially when you're beginning, and even for me now. You download these objects and inevitably there are these little roadblocks that you hit. Either the textures don't load, it doesn't load correctly, it doesn't completely look the way that it's supposed to look. So I'm going to try to address those issues in this video. So you'll be downloading objects and using them in your scene in all types of fun ways in no time. So there are a few different places that you can download these objects from. The main big ones are Turbosquid and CGI Trader. So for this video, we are going to be going with Turbosquid. So we're going to type in Turbosquid. It auto-completes for me. Turbosquid. So then you can search for whatever object you want to search. I'm going to say a chair. And now Turbosquid has a lot of free objects on here, and then it also has objects that you would pay for. And unsurprisingly, it wants to give you the paid ones first. So in the right corner over here, where it says sort by best match, you can change that to lower prices. And then so when you hover over, it'll show you the price for these objects. So now all the free ones are up top. And I'm going to just see if we can find anything cool. All right, so here we have this Aster luxury armchair that I think is pretty cool. And you'll also notice when you hover over, it'll say different file types. So for this, it says 3ds Max, we have FBX, Blender, 3ds Max, DXF. So for this tutorial, we're working in Blender. So ideally, Blender is the file type. That will work the best. Because I think what happens is people make these objects in other programs and then they convert them and export them in different ways. So if you can get a file that was actually made in Blender, that's the best case scenario. The other two that work are OBJ and FBX. So I think I'm going to go with this chair because you can see Blender and OBJ and FBX. And so yeah, you can just see that up top. If there's a model of an object that you want to download and it doesn't say Blender or OBJ or FBX, maybe try to find a different model. So I'm going to click on it and get some more info here. So it lets you get this preview. You can click through and kind of see what this object is looking like. And I think this looks pretty real. Like, yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing here. Show you what the mesh looks like. Price, formats. Another thing you want to look for is textures. So I don't know who would show an object with a texture and then not give you the texture for that object. But in case you don't know what you're looking at here, the leather on this chair is a texture, and that would be an image and a series of different images that will be plugged in, and we'll get into that later. Same thing with the wood on the chair. Sometimes that happens. It should say that it comes with textures. For formats, the native is Blender 3.0. Ooh, 3.0. Ooh, that's great. Then OBJ, FBX, which is great. And then you want a texture file separately. Sometimes it'll be in a zip file and it's all together. So it is possible to get an object and just, I'll give somebody the benefit of the doubt. And let's say that in the conversion, they didn't export the textures or it didn't connect the right way. So that is possible, but these are just some steps you can take to make sure that you don't waste your time and download an object that's not going to work, because some of these are not free, some of these are expensive, and I think a lot of them are worth it because somebody put their time and effort into making it and it looks really good. So, for me personally, to pay a little bit of money to get these models is not unreasonable unless you download it and it ultimately never works. So I'm just trying to give you a tool set of things to look for before you end up paying for a model that doesn't work for what you're trying to do. Another thing that you can look at is the model license. So this one is standard, editorial uses only. And you can click on this and read the full explanation of what that means and how that may relate to how you would like to use this object. But for now, this one's free. We're going to go ahead and click download. So although it's free, I think it still does want you to log in. I'm automatically logged in, but it's just a free account. They haven't done anything weird. This isn't an ad, but Turbosquid, I use it all the time, as you can see. So in here we have our different file types listed. So we could download this FBX file, we could download the blend file, we could download the OBJ file, and there's a textures.rar file. So for the sake of this video, I'm going to go with the OBJ and not with the blend. I'm going to run through a couple different ways of doing this for this video because I think for the sake of troubleshooting, it makes more sense for me to show you the harder way to do it. Importing it with the .blend file is very easy. So I'm going to use OBJ just as a teaching method. So we're going to download this OBJ, and we're going to download this textures.rar. So that's going to be in our downloads. It's going to download obviously as a RAR file. So double click that to open it. On a Mac, I think it just works. Maybe you need the unarchiver or something, but however you would unzip a RAR file, go ahead and do that. And then I personally like to put those into the same folder as the Blender file that you're working on, because when you have multiple Blender files and multiple folders and a bunch of different objects that you've downloaded from different places, it can all become very confusing. Within your blend file, it's looking for these textures in a specific place. If you run all of this from the downloads folder and then move it from the downloads folder, then Blender's not going to know where it is. There is an easy way to fix that, to recorrect it and tell it where to go, but we can just get ahead of that by keeping everything organized in one folder and not just connecting everything out of the downloads. So I've gone ahead and unzipped them. The folders are open. And in textures, you'll see it's just a series of images. And they've got different names: bump, color, glossy, normal. NRM is normal. COL, I suppose, is color. Color, multiple normals, which is unusual, and then roughness. So, okay, then in the other folder with our actual OBJ object, we've got an OBJ and an MTL file. So we're going to go into Blender. I'm going to press A to select all, and I'm going to press X to delete everything, just for the sake of this video. Now I'm going to go to File, Import, and for whatever reason you have to select the file type before you import it, so that is going to be OBJ. Then we navigate to wherever we put these files. So for me, it's YT Armchair. We're going to go into the OBJ file, and we're going to click on that OBJ. Then import OBJ. So now we have a very small version of our chair. I'm just going to, before you click anything else, with everything still selected, I'm going to press S and then move my mouse in basically any direction, I guess in the upwards direction, to make this thing bigger just as we're looking at it. Then, in this upper right-hand corner, I'm going to click on this material preview. And you can see we have the dreaded pink or purple that comes up here. So this color means that there is no color. It's looking for an image, and it's not finding it. So we're going to go into the shading workspace. We're going to click on one of these. And you can see that it's looking for that color file, and it can't find it. This color means it cannot find it. And then there's also this normal map. And one thing that I am recognizing here is this only has a base color and a normal map plugged into it, missing, but those are the only two. But then you look here, and the fabric should have a color, a bump, a glossy, a normal. So it's really just missing the gloss. But I'm going to turn you on to, it's not a secret, but this is a good, quick way to fix this. We are going to edit up here in the left corner and preferences. Then we're going to go down to add-ons, which is like in the middle, and we're going to type node. check Node Wrangler, and then that's it. You can just close it, and you don't have to do that every time. It's just when you first open up Blender or when you have a new installation of Blender, you have to do that. So I'm going to delete these nodes. That's what these things are. I'm going to delete the one that's plugged into color, press X. This one, I'm going to click on it, press X. This one, click on it, press X. So I'm going to zoom in. And so now what Node Wrangler allows us to do is you can click on this principled BSDF, the big long one in the middle, and you can press Control, hold down Shift, and then press T, and you can release. What this is going to do is it's going to automatically plug in those images that we looked at before in that folder. Navigate to the textures folder that is unzipped, and for this, it's the leather. This is two different materials. It's the wood material and it's the leather material. So those have to be dealt with separately, the same way, but dealt with separately. So all of this fabric leather, I'm going to hold down Shift, select all of it. We don't want the wood, we just want the fabric leather. And you want to click Principled Texture Setup down here. So click that, and then boom, we have our texture. So it still needs some tweaking, but everything is set up much better than how it was before. So now if you click on the wood, we can repeat this same thing. Just press X to delete these ones. Click on the principled BSDF in the middle, hold down Control, also hold down Shift, then press T, and now you want to select these ones for the wood. And I don't know in this particular object the difference between these two different normals, because I looked at them and they look the same to me, but I'm just going to pick one of them for this, and then Principled Texture Setup. Boom, we're looking better. So in here, I know I spoke about this in a previous video, I always like to use cycles instead of EV, which doesn't affect anything yet. All right, so we already made some progress. We're already out of that purple universe, and we got some color. So that's kind of the general thing, that sometimes it'll show up and it won't have the textures, and you have to put those textures manually this way. Then I'm going to zoom in down here on the trackpad, and I'm just going to give a little explanation of what these things are. So base color is the base color, and that has a color space of sRGB. You have something called the metallic, which could, as you guessed, make something metallic, and sometimes you have a map for that, and the map for the metallic would go in there. You have the roughness going in here, and so this roughness, you could also manipulate. Depends on the object, but you could manipulate it if sometimes you're loading these things and you see like, okay, the roughness for this, the way that they have it loaded in looks weird, and you could just disconnect that and manipulate that yourself. And that is a thing that I do all the time. Then the normal map. The normal is like another thing that determines the way that light interacts with this and like the way that light bounces off of it. So it could be a normal map, and for this wood part, it is a normal map. It could also be a bump map, and that makes that dimensional texture. So a bump map goes into a bump node, which is in vector. Just as an FYI, if you ever have to really do it manually, you can find that bump node in vector bump if you have to put that there. Then roughness, I guess for glossiness, it knows that it needs to invert that. TBD, I suppose, like to me, that chair looks a little crazy with that roughness. Because I feel like a chair would be, like a leather chair would be a little shinier, Maybe I'm just cheapening it, but then your base color, the color is going to be like either called color or diffuse or base. That goes into the base color. So just as a little background, because maybe for whatever reason this wouldn't work, this is also based on what these things are named. So if these are not named correctly, I think this isn't going to work. And if you do have to rename these, again, just as an FYI, like a base color is going to look something like that. It's going to look like the same color the material is supposed to be. The normal is going to be a bluey purple type situation. The roughness and the metallic are going to be in the gray, black, and white type of neighborhood. So that's just an FYI. If you get these and they're not labeled correctly, you can go through and relabel them and label one color, one normal roughness, just as a general FYI for the way that those things are working if you don't already know. So the other thing I would say, just as far as if we're using this chair, is so these multiple parts of the chair are using the same material is what's going on. So that's why we just had one of them selected and it changed it for all three. So if you click on it and you go over here to the material properties on the right, so if you change something about one, it'll change it about all three that are using that same material, as an FYI. And then as far as using this material, in my opinion, the texture seems crazy deep. So instead of having a strength of 1, I might do 0.5 because it looks like we're sitting on like a live alligator or something. So yeah, I'll lower that down. It's still a little bit high. I'm also going to save. And then another thing just for photorealism, a way that I like to look at things, even if I'm just going to use it in studio, if I'm trying to determine exactly how the material should look, I like to use an HDRI. An HDRI is a lighting environment where you basically take a panorama and the program can interpret where the light is coming from and how the light should be bouncing and the color from that panorama and put that into a 3D lighting environment, which maybe doesn't make a lot of sense until I show you. So, and you can find those for free on a lot of websites as well. So where it says object down here in our shading, I'm going to change this to world. And over here, I'm going to go to the rendered viewport. So right now, it's projecting this flat gray. And I'm going to go back into my browser, and I'm going to go to HDRIHaven.com. I'm going to go to Browse HDRIs, and you can kind of see what these environments look like. The main part of the image is what the HDRI is going to look like in the background, and then the other part, where these balls are, that is how the light interacts with these objects. I'm going to go with this one. So you can download it. I don't know that 4K is really necessary, so I'm going to download this. So now I'm going to take this file. Usually it's like .hdr or something, but this one's an EXR, which I believe also works. And I'm going to just add that into the same folder with my Blender file as to not confuse myself in the future. So we can go back in here into the world in the shading area, click on background, and I'm going to press Control-T. And now you can see that the whole environment is our purple color of death. So we're going to click open, and we're going to open our HDR right there, just as if it was an image or a texture. So open image, bam. Now we are floating around inside of this HDR with the light from this HDR. And then this mapping, you can rotate and control. You can spin the whole thing upside down if you want to. So I'm just going to spin it around on the Z-axis here. Get it kind of backlit. Looks a little bit better to me. And so most of the time, this HDR is not something that you would necessarily use as a real background, but I do like the light that they make a lot of times. So I would now go back to Object down here, and it looks like my roughness is crazy. So maybe I do reconnect the node from before. No, I still don't like that. And then let's say I also think that this wood looks a little too dull as well. So I'm going to disconnect the node, and I'm going to just myself bring that roughness down. get way up in there. So sure, let's say that looks real enough. Looks better when it's backlit. So I'm going to go back into our layout, and I'm going to play around with a little bit of a basic set. So I'm going to add a plane, and if you want more details on what I'm doing here, building this little set, I've gone into deeper detail in my intro to CGI videos in the beginning. So if you want like a real step-by-step on what I'm doing here, you can follow along with those. But for the people who have already followed along with those, I'm not going to torture them with going through that whole thing again. But I'm just making a little plane. I'm just trying to make a little something for our object to go on. Now, so these are all, this chair object is made up of multiple other objects, which when we start to play around with the shape of it and the scale of it can be annoying. So there are a couple different ways you could do this. You could parent it so that when you move one, the other ones move, or you could just join them all together. So because, for the sake, I'm just going to join these together. So you want to select every piece of it. You want to hold down Shift as you click on each piece. And then there's also this middle piece down there. Gotcha. All right, so you can press Command J, and that will join all of them together into what is being called a cube, except for this one. Sneaky. Then you can do it again. Press this one and the whole chair. Command J. Now the whole thing is one object. I'm going to call it chair. So your object has been joined together. You can break it up again if you need to, but I would suggest whatever you wanted to do to it when it was apart, to do it before. And yeah, it's possible to break it up later. Now we're just going to play around, going to rotate it, get a little fun angle. Now to duplicate, you press Shift D. So now it's duplicated up. I'm going to rotate it on the X-axis, rotate it on the Z-axis, grab it on the Y-axis, rotate it on the X. This is an example of like a little fun thing you could do. Go back to shading. I'm going to select both of them, bring them down so it looks like they're touching the surface. I'm going to scale this whole thing up. Then maybe, let's say we add a camera. And then I'll probably get in really close here and try to give it some extreme, extreme look here. Yeah, maybe I'll go even wider. So right, that was 35. Maybe I do 24. Yeah, I like that. And then grab it, move it down, rotate it on the Y-axis up here. Then I'm going to grab it on the X-axis, get even a little bit closer, RY again. Make this thing bigger, grab it on the Y. Going to do our render region here. And you know what, maybe I'll go long. Maybe going long would be more interesting for this. So I'm going to try 85, and then I'm just going to back us out. Maybe I'll do it over here. Yeah, so I'm just moving it around, playing around, just kind of showing how realistic this could potentially look. I realized I should also show you how to import if it's a Blender file, since that is our best case scenario. So I'm back in Turbosquid. I'm downloading this armchair blend file. If you're adding an object from a Blender file, like I said was the ideal scenario, you would go to File and Append. It's actually not Import, it's Append. I am not sure why, again. So you just want to navigate to wherever this chair is. Oh yeah, so it's not a folder, it's an object. So Aster luxury armchair.blend. So we're going to click on Append, and that takes us to all of these. So what you want is the object. And then I think you want all these, honestly. So I'm going to select all these. It's not always all these. And cameras show up in here. Lights show up in here. So sometimes there can be extra, like, annoying, weird stuff. But for right now, I'm just going to select all these and append. And yeah, so it came up really small. I'm just going to go ahead and press S because it's deep down in there. Press S and drag. So there we have our chair that we appended from the Blender file. We're going to press G and Z to get it bigger. And then let's see if it, yeah, so actually, oh yeah, so that's it. So this actually came up probably as intended with a much subtler version of this texture, which is, like I said, that's why this is ideal, because this is the way that this person made it. This is the way that it was intended, which looks much better. So now I'm just going to make a little weird little stack here. So yeah, thanks for following along. Hopefully this gave you some insights into how to add objects and how to troubleshoot. I know there are a lot of things that can go wrong, and this is something that's really frustrating for a lot of people. So if you have any questions, drop a comment. I'll try to answer everybody. And hopefully this marks a new beginning for you, and you can make a bunch of cool, different, fun stuff and add different objects. And there's just infinity objects. You don't have to buy real ones anymore. You could just make them huge. Everything is possible now. So thanks for watching along. I'm excited to see what you all make.